So let's open your Jupyter notebook. Now we will write our code. Example of try, accept, and finally close. So first you will write your try block and then your code num equal to int input, enter an integer number, accept outside the try block, accept you will raise an value error, now print number. This is our statement what we want to print on the screen in the accept block. Number entered is not an integer, else print integer accepted. And last, the finally block. Print this block is, this is the statement of finally block. So print this block is always executed. Now we will execute this code and this is our output. So we will type 10. What is the output? Here you can see integer accepted. So this is the statement of else block and this block is always executed. So as we know that finally block will always executed. Okay, this is very best advantage of finally block. And if we type here any string number, for example any string word, so number entered is not an integer. This is the statement of accept block and this block is always executed. So in this case also finally block always executed. So here we can type 7. Okay, now we can also type 10. So this is our code of try, accept, else and finally block. Now move to our topic. Zoom the screen and so here are one question of try, accept, else and finally block. So what this question says, this function dives 10 by a user provided number handling potential exceptions such as 0, division or invalid input. So this is our question, this function divides. Okay, so here are this is one function by a user provided number handling potential exceptions. So in this question we have to handle exceptions such as 0, divisible by, invalid. So first we will discuss this code. First you will define your function and then inside the function this is our try block and then code that may raise an error. So this code may raise an error. Okay, if the number is divisible by 0. If x is equal to 0 in this code, so this code will raise an error. Okay, now except block 0 divisible by error, 0 division error, print cannot divide by 0 except value error. Now again except block print, so the Python will print invalid input, please entered a valid number. Now the else block. So what else block will print? It will print no exceptions occurred. Okay, if no exception occurred, and at last finally block will come. So print existing function. Okay guys, and and at last call your function and the function name, which is divide numbers, and then use parenthesis. So let's start code of this question. So first zoom the screen and then we will write our code. Now what is the question? Create a function when the function divides 10 by a user provided number, handling potential exceptions such as 0, division or invalid. Okay, now def divide. First we will create our function and then here try block. So try, so here code that may raise an exception, this code may raise an exception if the number is division by 0. Then create a variable x and int, take input from user, input, enter a number. Now this is the result, 10 division by 0. Print result and then your result. Now except block, except 0 division error. Okay, now you can print your statement. So what the statement? Cannot divide by 0. This is the statement of except block. Okay, now again we will specify our except block, and this block raise value error, not raise, it will tells us that this is the error. Okay, now print this statement of except block. Invalid input, please enter a valid number. Now the second last, which is else block, and the statement of else block, which is no exceptions occurred. Okay, now at last your finally block. Finally, and then print existing function. Okay, and at last call the function. And what is the name of the function? So this is the name of the function, which is divide number, and then this is parenthesis. This is, as we know that this is default parameter, so divide number, and then now we will execute our code and look the output. So enter number. Here we will specify x. Okay, now execute this code. And what is this? Now type something, for example 6. So this is our output result 1.66 and no exceptions occurred. So this is the statement of else block, and existing function at last. So finally block will always execute it. So this is the output of finally block. But what happen if we give the output 0? So it cannot divide by 0. So this is our error and existing function. So finally block will always execute it. So cannot divide by 0, existing function. So alright everyone, now that you have hopefully understood, let's take a closer look at this code. Now, so give the heading to this question. So now, okay. So alright everyone, I hope now that you have understand it. Now move to our topic. So zoom the screen now. So now I will explain you about this code. So in this code there are components of exception handling in Python. So the first block, which is try block. Now try block is used to enclose the code that may raise an exception. Python attempts to execute the code inside a try block. If no exceptions occur during the execution of the try block, the execution process to the else block if present, or skips to the end of the try except finally construct. If an exception occurs during the execution of the try block, Python immediately jumps to the corresponding except block if one is available to handle the exception. Okay, now the second block, which is except block. The except block is used to handle exceptions that occur within the associated try block. When an exception is raised, Python searches for a match except block. Okay, if a matching except block is found based on the type of exceptions raised, the code inside that block is executed. You can have multiple except blocks to handle different types of exceptions, allowing for specific error handling based on the type of exception raised. If no matching except block is found for a raised exception, the exception propagates to the caller or results in a program termination if not catched by an enclosing context. And then else block will come. The else block is optional. Okay guys, so the else block is optional and follows the except blocks in the exception handling construct. It is executed only if no exceptions are raised in the try block. The code inside else block is executed after the try block finishes executing successfully. For example, without raising any exceptions. Okay. The else block is commonly used for code that should run only when no exceptions occur, providing a clear. So this is our else block. Okay. So you can have multiple except blocks to handle different types of exceptions. So there is multiple exceptions. The else block is commonly used for code that should run only when no exceptions occur, providing a clear separation between the normal execution part and exception handling logic. And at last, this is our finally block. The finally block is optional and follows the try and except blocks in the exception handling construct. It is always executed. Okay. So it is always executed. This is very important that it is always executed. Okay. So it is always executed regardless of whether an exception occurs or not. The code inside the finally block is used for cleanup actions such as closing files, releasing resources, or restoring states. Okay guys, so the finally block ensures that certain operations are performed regardless of whether an exception is raised or not, making it useful for releasing external resources in a predictable manner. So alright everyone, I hope that you hopefully understood. Okay, now here is a summarized flow. So what is try, except, else, and finally? The code inside the try block is executed. Okay. If an exception occurs during the execution of the try block, Python searches for a matching except block. If found, the code inside that except block is executed. If no exceptions occur during the execution of the try block, the code inside the else block is executed, regardless of whether an exception occurs or not. The code inside the finally block is executed. So this is the summarized explanation of try, except, else and finally clause. So alright, so let's take a closer look to this definition, this explanation